So welcome to SPE Live. I'm Paige McCown. SPE Live is made possible in part by a sponsorship from the SPE Foundation. Today we're talking about energy startups and answering some key questions about how startups find support, what is the role of larger companies in investing and mentoring startups, and how can SPE help, and is it actually a good time to invest? According to the IEA, excuse me, at the start of 2020, global energy investment was on track for about 2% growth. After COVID, investments are now expected to significantly drop. But how will the industry succeed in achieving digital transformation and cleaner energy goals without these investments? A lot of the new innovations from small startup companies with niche technology is vital to our industry growth. So our discussion will look at these challenges and show how companies can be successful. Today, we brought together a panel of industry professionals that have been involved with the SPE Startup Village at ATCE. So my guests today are Mike Party, Emerging Technology Specialist at Hess Corporation, Yvonne Berg, co-founder of INGU Solutions, Brad Burke, Managing Director at Rice Alliance for Technology and Entrepreneurship. Welcome. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
Thanks, Paige.
Hi.
Thanks, Paige.
Hi. Good morning for you. It might be afternoon or evening for some of our viewers. So, Mike, let's start with you. So you're on the committee for the SPE Startup Village at ATCE. Can you tell us a little bit about the program and how it got started?
Yeah, so the event is really the brainchild of a few motivated SPE members, including the event chairperson, David Reed. They saw how other industries were working with the startup ecosystem at events like South by Southwest and realized that our industry needed a better way to engage with startups and tap into this entrepreneurial pool of people with big ideas of how we can do things differently and better. The first Startup Village was in 2017, so this will be the fourth installment. And it was really spun up during the last downturn of 2016 and 2017. And so it's really important in times like then and times like now that we tap into this entrepreneurial pool of people and really focus and double down on these efforts. So Startup Village is a fast-paced competition that will show off some of the most promising emerging energy technology companies. Over the past several months, we've been collecting applications from all over the world. And just recently, 12 companies and 2 alternates have been selected to compete in the competition. These companies will have roughly 5 minutes to pitch their company and take questions from a panel of judges. Winners are selected, including a Best in Show, Rising Star, and a People's Choice Award. And the winners will be taking home more than just cash prizes this year with some really great in-kind sponsorships that are lined up and will be announced soon.
So that's great. It's a great opportunity. So you mentioned the monetary prize, but it's a lot more than that, right? There's a partnership, mentorship for the company. Can you tell us about how that works?
Yeah, so this year has been a little bit of a challenge in planning. It's been more challenging to get sponsors. And we've really taken a different approach in really tapping into some of these in-kind sponsors and finding what other opportunities we can provide to the contestants. So each of the contestants will go through a coaching session where mentors from whether it's VC firms or industry experts will be helping, improving pitch decks and providing insights in maybe how best to secure funding. And on top of that, these companies will be competing for things like these in-kind prizes we mentioned, which may include exposure to, more operators. There's a few prizes that will include a coaching session with the SPE technical director of their choice. And so I think it's going to be really great this year, providing those additional packages and really trying to help not just provide a check at the end, which everyone will be grateful to have right now, but also really helping to network and provide opportunities for growth to these companies.
Yeah, that's great. So now, Yvonne, we're going to jump to you. Your company was the top prize winner at the 2019 ATC Startup Village in Calgary. Can you tell us a little bit about the INGU story and how you came to work with the Startup Village in ATCE?
Yes, of course, Paige. And because Startup Village is all about pitching your company. So let me first, for those who are unfamiliar with our company, with INGU, tell you a little bit about what we do. We actually offer inline inspection as a service. So using our pipers, which is this little device over here. This is the actual one, by the way. You can assess the condition of your pipelines on a regular basis. It's a self-serve model, so operators deploy them themselves, and we analyze the data. And based on the results, then the operator can decide what next steps are needed. They give you access pipers to all pipelines, so oil, gas, water, all materials, as small as 2 inches in diameter. They check the condition of the pipe wall, look for leaks, deposits, without any interruption of operations. Because of our attractive pricing in our as a service model, our clients can inspect much more of their pipelines as well as much more often using their current budgets. So going to our journey, maybe start at the beginning. Our very first trial was with Shell back in our early days in 2016. We were just with the two of us. We got help from family and friends. And of course, we were really excited that we had this trial with Shell. But it had to go well, of course. And luckily for us, it did. So in the next year, we were fortunate that we were one of the first 2 participants in Chevron Technology Ventures Catalyst program. So we got the opportunity to do many trials with them as well. And then early 2018, we finally got our first operational pipeline. Since then, we've been growing really, really well. To date, we've seen over 1,000 kilometers or well over 600 miles of pipeline, working with about 40 clients, still Shell and Chevron, but many more. And we have a team of 17 now, of which 2 are based in Houston. And for us, these startup events, such as the Startup Village of last year, have always been very relevant. It got us the opportunity to meet with industry leaders, but also investors in our industry. And that's so valuable. If you are a startup company, especially in the space we're in, it's so tough to get that first operational line, as I already just mentioned in our story. So it gives you, these events give you the opportunity to establish friendly relationships with people like Mike, who get enthusiastic about what we are trying to accomplish with our company. And they give you a warm contact and can introduce you to the people you need to talk to in the company, in their own company. So that is extremely helpful. So I really believe that these type of events are of high value to startup companies. And the money prize we won last year, it was a really big one. We were very happy with that. We actually had the team, just as a fun fact, we had the team spend part of that, and we ended up with office snacks.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I mean, it's you know, both from the monetary and then the resources and the people you meet, like you mentioned, Mike from Hess. And what about Brad? So Brad is from the Rice Alliance for Technology and Entrepreneurship. So you're partnering with SPE for the Startup Village. Can you tell us a little bit about the Rice Alliance?
Yeah, I'd be glad to, Paige. Thanks a lot. So we've been involved in the Startup Village from the very beginning. So this will be our 4th year. But the organization, the Rice Alliance for Technology and Entrepreneurship, has been around since 2000. And we are part of Rice University, but our mission has really been to support technology startup companies in this region and beyond. And so we're actually celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. We've looked back, and over the last 20 years, we have seen more than 2,600 companies. These are startup companies come through our programs. And those companies have raised more than $21 billion in funding. So
wow, that's great. Yeah.
It's kind of a measure of how active the entrepreneurship community is, and it's probably more active than people realize. But if I could echo some things Yvonne said, a really good value benefit associated with the Startup Village is the ability to connect with investors and corporates that are difficult for most entrepreneurs and most startups to get that introduction. And as she talked about the process for a startup, that's kind of the quintessential process where you first start with some friends and family funding. Then you may get some angel investors, then you may get some corporate investors or corporate contacts. Because one of the goals, as they've successfully done, is to have a successful pilot, because nobody wants to be the first pilot or first trial. And so to get that first trial and that first pilot is huge for a startup company. And so, I think that one of the ways to look at the Startup Village is it is a way to get those first introductions, to get your first funding or get your first pilot. And so you can get off the ground. And so, we're really, really fortunate to be a part of the Startup Village, and fortunate with companies like Hess supporting it. That, I think it's a great value to entrepreneurs and startups who want to kind of get that first foothold, get that footing.
Well, and it's also good for the corporations that want to invest, right? So it's a good way for them to maybe fast track technology that they're looking to develop. And so do you see a lot of companies that want to be involved with this, Brad?
We do. From both, it's true both from a startup perspective and a corporate perspective, because as you mentioned, almost every major corporation today is looking for innovative technologies. And so we've seen a steady increase. And we've been doing this for 20 years, but especially in the last 10 years, we've seen a tremendous increase in the number of energy corporations who are now either investing in these early stage technology companies or scouting and looking for new innovations. And, one of the questions we often get asked is, when crude prices are down and we're in a recession, is it a good time for an entrepreneur? And what a number of corporate venture capitalists have said is that it's in times like these when reducing expenses to finding ways to get first production faster and producing more oil is even more important to the company. It's maybe not as important when oil is $100 a barrel, but when it's $40 a barrel, it's much more important. And so I've heard many of the corporate venture capitalists say, this is when the role they have within the company is even more important than it is normally.
Right. And then you add the COVID situation where everything's remote and the whole digital transformation of the industry. So that's kind of spurring a lot of technology to make remote or have companies do things with less, right? With less employees and less resources, maybe.
Yeah, that's right. From my perspective, it's a twofold. It's companies are trying to do more for less. They're trying to do more remotely, but it also in some ways kind of levels the playing field because everyone is connecting today virtually. So you don't necessarily need to travel to visit a potential investor or customer because everybody's doing everything virtually today. So in some ways, it levels the playing field from a startup that may not have a lot of capital to invest in the marketing or the travel or meetings or conferences. It in some ways might make it a little bit easier in some sense. We all love to go back to in person, everything being back in person, but
yeah, we're kind of getting used to the Zoom look, but it's still an important thing to get back to the field and get back to working. So we did have one good question from the audience for you, Brad. Are those fundings available to all energy startups around the globe or just those in the US?
Well, most of the investors that we see, the venture capital investors, and these could either be corporate venture capital investors or what I would call institutional standalone investors, venture capital firms. The majors, the Chevron Technology Ventures, Shell Technology Ventures, they are global companies, and so they are looking everywhere for potential investments. So it doesn't necessarily matter whether you are, and I'm sitting here in Houston, but it doesn't really matter whether you're sitting here in Houston or the US. Most of those investors are looking not for where the company resides, but for the best companies to invest in.
Right, and those are global. So,
Those are global.
matter of fact, I think we have, for the Startup Village this year, we have competitors from Canada, France, Norway, Switzerland, the UK, the US. So it's all over the globe.
Yeah, and that's been great. And one of the benefits of actually going to a virtual event this year, and one of the nice ways we were able to pivot, and by not needing to travel to actual ATCE location to compete, we've been able to open up that pool and really get more companies from around the globe competing.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a bonus. More people can attend. So let's see, we've got another question here. What key traction matrix are venture capitalists looking for in energy, and how COVID has impacted those traction strategies? Can you speak to that, Mike, or
Brad may be better. Yeah, I think Brad may
Yeah.
be better tied into the VC community here.
Well, I'll answer it, but Yvonne has also been dealing with a number of the corporate VCs, so you can add Yvonne to this. But
Yes.
I think that there is, if you from a venture capital standpoint, there are about 5 or 6 key things that a venture firm is looking for. They're looking for a startup that has a technology that's solving an obvious problem, and it's a big problem. So it's got to be a big problem to the industry. It's a big pain point. It's clear what that pain point is. And the reason is, then second, they're looking for making sure that there are customers who would be willing to pay for that technology. So it's hard to get people to pay for additional technology unless it is a clear either cost reduction or improvement in their business. And I think third, they're looking for a technology that has some proof that it works. That can be tough in the early years of a startup. However, having a customer who will pilot it or trial it is a key factor in understanding, does the technology really work? And I would say the last thing, and I'll add, I could go on, but the last thing is the team itself. I think they're looking for, most startups don't have complete management teams, but they're looking for the expertise and looking to someone, a CEO, a founder who is knowledgeable, experienced, and is coachable, so that when they start to work with that startup and that founder, they know that that'll be a good relationship. So I think those are some of the things.
I can add that was a great summary. I can add from the experience that I had with INGU, it kind of changes over time as well. Brad already mentioned the team, for instance, especially if you don't have any commercial clients yet. So you are in your early stages, then they look a lot at what does the team look like, what's your background, are you familiar with the industry, are you familiar with the problem, and that changes over time. So later on, the most important thing, we also started with angel funding, and late last year we were really fortunate that we were able to close a Series A investment. But the most important thing is that you start building your relationships with investors at an early time, and also keep updating them once a year, twice a year, with your progress. And if they see that you are making progress and you get your first trial and you get your first commercial customer, then that could be enough for them to start a discussion about investing. So it's not always about the metrics. Of course, they are relevant, but it's also what's the progress you're making. And that's one of the benefits of these type of events, such as Startup Village, because we ended up with our Series A investors who we met and talked to each year at these events. So it was very helpful to be able to, it benefited us because we were able to give them an update, they could see the progress, and yeah, that's highly relevant. So build a connection with these investors, and then the metrics become more and more relevant at later stages. But if you need this early stage funding, then that's a highly relevant thing to do.
No, that's good. That's good advice too. We've got a lot of comments of people asking for advice, and I think we're giving it to them. So Mike, let's go back to you from the Hess point of view. Hess is one of the sponsors for the Startup Village. How did you get involved, or how did Hess get involved with the Startup Village?
Yeah, so we got involved last year when we were asked to sponsor. And so we sponsored last year as our first time at ATCE in Calgary. Hess is a little bit different than some of the other companies involved in Startup Village in that we don't have a corporate venture capital arm and don't invest in early stage companies. We do, however, want to partner with these companies when it makes sense. So we have an expert and focused team working for our CTO, Rob Fast, constantly scouting for new technologies to make our operations safer, to continue to minimize our environmental impact, and to make our wells more productive and cost effective. So often this results in us needing to work with early stage companies. And I'd be exaggerating if I said that we had this down to a science, but we're learning as we're going, we're getting better every day, and honestly, we're having a lot of fun in the process. And one thing we've learned is that working with these early stage companies is a lot different than working with a major service company, and that's okay. In these efforts, we can provide domain expertise in oil and gas operations, and we kind of expect the startups to bring impactful tech and new ways of working that really creates a win-win scenario for both companies. It really fits into Hess's purpose to be the most trusted energy partner in the world is kind of our purpose statement. And, working with startups is no different. We really want to be a good partner with these companies, whether or not we end up working with them. And so that can be something where maybe we spend some time mentoring and coaching them and even providing a lot of feedback and access to our SMEs so that these companies can continue to refine their value proposition so that the next time they go meet with a company, they're a little bit more prepared and maybe have a better understanding of how to apply their technology to really impact value for those companies.
No, I think that's a great value. And Yvonne, I think you would agree as well that, having a partnership with a large organization and helping get through the paperwork and the roadmap to getting there is very valuable.
Yeah, I mentioned that we were a participant in Chevron Technology Ventures Catalyst program, which is for really early stage technology. And that gave us the best opportunity ever because we got to work with their experts. We got to talk to so many people within Chevron. We were doing trials with them. So we were learning so much from that time. And that's something, if you can establish such a connection with companies such as Hess or Chevron or the other operators, that's a huge, that can give you such a big acceleration for your startup, definitely.
Yeah, so that connection is key. So we've got another question. Mike, I'm not sure if you can answer this completely for them, but they want to know about getting more information, how they can get involved in Hess's Startup Initiative. So if you can give us a little information about how they might go about that.
Yeah, this is great. So we haven't formalized an approach where we have kind of an open portal for people to apply yet. This initiative is relatively new for us. We're kind of 2 years in the making on really transforming the way that we think about this. But I will say that we have several partnerships, and including the ATCE Startup Village, where we will add all these companies through what we call our technology funnel, which is essentially our database of new technologies and new companies that we want to review and potentially pilot. But I would say that anybody and everybody can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I try as best as I can to respond. So where I sit in our organization, I really help manage that process, and I kind of sit at the point where our external efforts meet our internal organization, and I try to help connect the dots as best I can. And so we have actually had companies that we are moving towards pilot with that have reached out on LinkedIn. So it is to me on LinkedIn. So it's not impossible for that to happen. I will apologize to anybody that that maybe doesn't get a response very quickly from me, I try to do my best to get back as best as I can. But that's one way to go through it, as well as, working with our partners.
Yeah, just look for the guy with the green hat shirt, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You're representing us very well today, Mike. Thank you. Well, there's still a few questions coming in, but I wanted to, and we've already started this roundtable discussion, but what kind of advice can each of you give people who are looking for, relationships, capital, anything to get their technology, their company off the ground?
Yeah, I'm glad to go jump in on this, because I was going to tee off of something that Mike said, which was, I was curious about Mike's comment about LinkedIn. In fact, when I thought about this before we started, my advice was going to be that it's really helpful to get a warm introduction to someone within a corporation or within a venture capital firm or within a corporate VC. What a lot of VCs I've heard say is that they don't really want a business plan thrown over the transom to them unless it comes from a trusted source or someone they know. So my recommendation would be that rather than simply reach out to someone that you don't know, find a way to get a warm introduction of somebody who knows somebody. And these days, almost everyone is connected with everyone else. So we're 2 degrees away from just about everyone on LinkedIn these days. And so it sounds like Mike is more receptive than others that I've heard, or maybe he's more able to deal with people who come to him without a prior introduction. A recommendation that I think is very helpful is find someone who knows someone, or attend something like the Startup Village, where then you could reach out to Mike and say, hey, I know you're involved in Startup Village, and it feels like a warm introduction, even though in reality it's someone that you don't know yet. The last thing I would say is someone like Mike probably has tens or hundreds of other connections in the industry that could help you. And whereas Mike, it may or may not be a fit for Hess, but Mike might be able to introduce you to 2 or 3 other people in other companies that there might be a fit. And I wouldn't hold back from asking for those introductions, because it's just like anything networking. Once you meet one person, I've found the ecosystem to be extremely helpful to each other. And so you can ask one person to introduce you to others as well. And I would take advantage of that.
Yeah, you're right. And things like the Startup Village, and there's other organizations and programs for that as well, and even virtually. So it'll be virtual this year, but just as we're chatting and talking here, people can still make those connections. One quick question, which I'm not sure if you know specifics about this, but I would say yes, in any shape or form of technology, is the cybersecurity of industrial control system is one of the initiatives of interest. And I would think cybersecurity or any kind of technology that's going to help make the digital transition for the industry would be of interest.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely right. As we're moving down the road towards more automation and more connected devices, the security of those is going to be paramount. Especially when we think about safety critical pieces of equipment and drilling completion operations, production operations. So absolutely, that's something that's going to be of high importance in our industry.
Yeah, we just wanted to give a shout out to them for that question. But yeah, any kind of technology is of interest, I would imagine. So Yvonne, what are some of your, you've talked a lot already, but what would be some of your key pieces of advice for somebody or a company?
Yeah, I think for investors, I already mentioned just start to establish a relationship at an early stage and just keep in touch, not once a month, but just every now and then. If you have news, just let them know and try to talk to them at events or just give them a call. If you have something new, send them a quick note with an email. that also goes for clients. We connected at a really early stage with clients, and we learned so much about that. So just start an open conversation. Tell them what you don't know yet. Tell them what you can do, what you can do. Just manage the expectations, but have an open conversation. And our experience is that that learned us a lot. Not so much. We had this awesome. We still have this awesome technology, but you learn a lot about how it's applied within a company. What is the simple things? In our case, for instance, the questions were, how do we get a pipe in a pipe and out of the pipe? So just learn about the questions that your client has that you might not think about at first. And also establish that relationship, build on that. I think that's a good thing to do.
Right, definitely. Mike, do you have any, I mean, like I said, I think we've talked the whole time about advice, but I had a couple people asking about what are some of the disruptive technologies that have come across recently. Mike, I don't know if you can talk about any of the past winners or, you know, just briefly about who's been involved in the Startup Village.
Well, so as we mentioned, INGU was the past winner last year, so we can talk about their disruptive technology. But there are, I'd have to go back and look at some of the previous winners. I can't scratch them off the top of my head. They are listed on the website.
Yeah, so they are. I think there's even an interview with the previous winner from maybe 2018 on there as well. So.
And we do, so we try to make sure that we have a little bit of diversity across the SPE functions and who will be competing in Startup Village, so that we don't end up with, you know, everyone being in big data or everyone being in a drilling or completions technology. So we like to get a really big spread there. We've seen some companies recently that have been coming through Rice Alliance in the SPE Startup Village applications focused on IoT devices for artificial lift systems. That's been a really big sector right now. And if you think about the number of artificial lift systems that are in just even, you know, continental US, that's a huge market size there. If you can improve operations there. And I would say, you know, when we really think about disruptive technologies, one that I'm always love to talk about because I'm a little bit of an enthusiast, but, you know, additive manufacturing, I think, is really going to play a big role in our industry at some point in the future. I think we're still in that pit of despair, as they call it in the hype cycle, for additive, but I see more and more use cases being defined every day, and I think that's really going to start kind of coming to light in the next few years.
Yeah, no, that's great. You know, as we started the conversation, that's the way the industry is going to grow and become more remote, more digital, cleaner. You know, a lot of clean technologies are coming into play with a lot of the big organizations that are moving towards zero emissions. So it's all over the spectrum of the industry. So I wanted to give everybody a little bit of information about the Startup Village. So as all of the annual technical conference and exhibition, it'll be virtual. So the Startup Village will start on October 12th. So mark that on your calendars. So we'll start that Monday with the expert discussions, which are the roundtable discussions and fireside chats with other experts. That's where people can maybe get a little bit more insight and advice. And then on the Tuesday, on October 13th, will be the startup competition and then the closing ceremony, which you'll also have the opportunity to speak with experts and do roundtables. And like we mentioned before, competitors are coming from Canada, France, Norway, Switzerland, UK, and US. So it is open globally for anybody who wants to be involved. And if you'd like to attend it, the free event, you can go to the ATC website and look for Startup Village, or you can see the link on this screen right now and follow that and be involved and learn more about what you can do for your company and how you can help the industry moving forward. So I think we've had a great discussion. Thanks, Mike, Yvonne, Brad. I really appreciate your time and energy towards this.
Yeah, thank you, Paige. Thanks for having us.
We look forward to seeing you on the 13th, October 13th.
Thank you, Paige.
Great.
Thank you. And thanks to the SPE Foundation for their support and funding in the SPE Live broadcast. We'll see you next time.